The year is 1871. Europe is at peace. The Franco-Prussian War has ended, and a new German Empire has been proclaimed at Versailles. This moment seemed to promise a golden age, an era of progress, invention, and prosperity. Cities like Paris, London, and Berlin flourished, becoming centers of art, science, and industry. People believed reason and civilization had made major wars obsolete. International trade boomed, and royal families were bound by blood across borders. Queen Victoria was called the grandmother of Europe, her descendants ruling Germany, Russia, and beyond. The future felt secure, but beneath the surface, old resentments and new ambitions simmered. The unification of Germany had upset the balance of power. France, humiliated and stripped of Alsace and Lorraine, nursed a deep desire for revenge. Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire struggled to hold together their diverse populations. Russia eyed expansion, while Britain guarded its empire and navy. This was an age of contradictions, wealth and poverty, science and superstition, cooperation and fierce nationalism. Most Europeans walked their grand boulevards, unaware that their leaders were setting the stage for disaster. Alliances, military pride, and nationalism were turning Europe into a collection of armed camps. The peace after 1871 was only an intermission, not a true peace. The forces of progress were also forces of tension. The continent was a powder keg, waiting for a spark. The beautiful era was, in truth, an age of illusions. At the heart of Europe stood the new German Empire, industrial, militarily formidable, and led by Chancellor Otto von Bismarck. Bismarck's strategy was to keep France isolated and avoid a two-front war. France, still wounded by defeat, was united in its desire for revenge and the return of Alsace and Lorraine. Unable to face Germany alone, France sought allies who also feared German power. Across the Channel, Britain focused on its navy and global empire, practicing splendid isolation. But Germany's rise began to worry London, threatening its trade and security. In the east, Austria-Hungary was a fragile patchwork of nationalities, fearing the rise of Slavic nationalism. Russia, vast but backward, sought influence in the Balkans and access to the Mediterranean. The rivalry between Austria-Hungary and Russia over southeastern Europe became a source of instability. Britain, Germany, France, Austria-Hungary, and Russia each watched the others, wary and suspicious. Old alliances and new ambitions tangled the continent in a web of distrust. The royal families were related, but blood ties could not overcome national interests. The memory of defeat and the hunger for power shaped foreign policy across Europe. The continent was a family of rivals, each preparing for the worst. The balance of power was delicate, and every move threatened to tip it. Nationalism, militarism, and alliances set the stage for confrontation. The peace was uneasy, the future uncertain. Europe was a chessboard, and every piece was in motion. The next crisis could ignite the whole continent. The family of nations was drifting toward disaster. Bismarck, Germany's Iron Chancellor, knew his new empire was strong but vulnerable. To prevent encirclement, he built a web of alliances to keep France isolated and maintain peace. The League of the Three Emperors united Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Russia, but rivalries in the Balkans strained it. Bismarck's real achievement was the dual alliance with Austria-Hungary in 1879, a secret pact against Russia. Italy joined in 1882, forming the Triple Alliance. These alliances were defensive, meant to deter aggression and preserve the status quo. Bismarck even signed a secret reinsurance treaty with Russia, promising neutrality. For a time, his system worked, isolating France and balancing rivalries. But the alliances were complex and depended on Bismarck's skill. When he left, the system's stability was at risk. The alliances tied Germany's fate to Austria-Hungary and set the stage for future conflict. The peace of Europe now rested on a fragile diplomatic web. One misstep could unravel it all. The continent was secure until it wasn't. In 1888, Kaiser Wilhelm II took the German throne, ambitious, impulsive, and eager for global power. He clashed with Bismarck, who favored caution and balance. In 1890, Wilhelm forced Bismarck to resign, ending an era of careful diplomacy. The new Kaiser let the reinsurance treaty with Russia lapse, believing Germany could manage without it. This was a grave mistake. France seized the chance to ally with Russia, ending its isolation. French money fueled Russian industry and military growth. In 1894, the Franco-Russian alliance was formalized, a direct threat to Germany. Bismarck's nightmare of a two-front war became reality. Germany was now encircled by hostile powers. The continent split into two rival blocs, the Triple Alliance and the Franco-Russian Alliance. The balance of power was shattered. Wilhelm's quest for greatness had made Germany less secure. The old safety nets were gone. Diplomacy gave way to suspicion and arms races. The alliances grew more rigid, the stakes higher. Europe was now divided, and the path to war was open. The new course had set the continent on a collision course. The age of Bismarckian peace was over. The Franco-Russian alliance changed everything. Europe was now split, the Triple Alliance versus France and Russia. Britain at first stayed aloof, but Germany's naval ambitions alarmed London. The German naval buildup threatened Britain's supremacy at sea. An arms race began. Each new German battleship met with two British ones. Britain abandoned isolation, seeking new partners. In 1904, Britain and France signed the Entente Cordiale, settling colonial disputes and signaling a new partnership. In 1907, Britain and Russia resolved their own rivalries, completing the Triple Entente. Now, Germany, Austria-Hungary and Italy faced France, Russia, and Britain. The alliances were not all formal, but the division was clear. Europe was two armed camps, each suspicious and fearful of the other. The naval race and diplomatic shifts deepened the divide. The balance of power had become a balance of fear. The continent was primed for confrontation. The old order was gone. Only tension remained. The Balkans, once ruled by the Ottoman Empire, became a hotbed of nationalism and rivalry. New nations like Serbia, Bulgaria, and Greece emerged, each with territorial ambitions. Austria-Hungary feared Serbian nationalism would unravel its multi-ethnic empire. Serbia dreamed of uniting all South Slavs, threatening Vienna's stability. Russia, protector of the Slavs, supported Serbia for both cultural and strategic reasons. The Balkans became the stage for great power competition. Austria-Hungary and Russia vied for influence, turning local disputes into international crises. In 1908, Austria-Hungary annexed Bosnia and Herzegovina, angering Serbia and humiliating Russia. The Balkan Wars of 1912-13 redrew borders and fueled Serbian confidence. Austria-Hungary grew more alarmed as Serbia grew stronger. The region was a powder keg, its fuse burning short. Nationalism and great power rivalry made the Balkans Europe's most dangerous flashpoint. Each crisis brought the continent closer to war. The alliances ensured that any spark could ignite a wider conflict. The Balkans were the fault line of Europe. The next crisis would be the last. The years before 1914 saw an unprecedented military buildup. Industrial advances fueled new weapons, machine guns, artillery, and dreadnought battleships. The arms race was fiercest between Britain and Germany at sea, and between France and Germany on land. Each nation watched its rivals, determined not to fall behind. Germany's Schlieffen Plan aimed for a quick victory over France before turning east to Russia. Military planning became rigid, with timetables that left little room for diplomacy. Militarism swept society, armies were glorified, and generals gained influence. Parades and uniforms became symbols of national pride. The belief grew that war was inevitable and winnable. Mobilization plans were so complex that once started, they were almost impossible to stop. The instruments of war were ready, the plans set. The great powers were armed and waiting. The next crisis would not be contained. Europe was poised on the edge. The years before 1914 were marked by international crises, dress rehearsals for disaster. In 1905, Kaiser Wilhelm's visit to Morocco challenged France and Britain, but only strengthened their alliance. The 1911 Agadir crisis saw Germany send a gunboat to Morocco, nearly provoking war. Britain warned Germany it would not stand aside. Germany backed down, feeling humiliated. Each crisis left bitterness and a resolve to be stronger next time. The Balkans saw repeated turmoil, with wars and annexations raising tensions. In Germany, the sense of encirclement grew. In Austria-Hungary, crushing Serbia became an obsession. France and Russia were determined not to yield again. Diplomacy gave way to brinkmanship. Each confrontation drained goodwill and hardened attitudes. The alliances made every crisis a potential catastrophe. The stage was set for a final, fatal spark. Europe had rehearsed the tragedy many times. The real performance was about to begin. By summer 1914, Europe was a continent of alliances, armies, and suspicion. Nationalism and militarism had turned patriotism into rivalry and hate. The system was primed for a shock. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in Sarajevo by a Serbian nationalist. Austria-Hungary issued an ultimatum to Serbia. When Serbia balked, war was declared. Russia mobilized to support Serbia. Germany declared war on Russia, then France, and invaded Belgium. Britain, bound by treaty and alarmed by the invasion of Belgium, declared war on Germany. In weeks, all the great powers were at war. The long peace was shattered. The alliances meant to keep the peace had become engines of destruction. The beautiful era was over. Sir Edward Grey, Britain's foreign secretary, said, "The lamps are going out all over Europe, we shall not see them lit again in our lifetime." The Great War had begun. The world would never be the same. The age of illusions was gone. Catastrophe had arrived.